Robinson Crusoe, Chapter 4. He settles in the Brazils as a planter, makes another voyage, and is shipwrecked. As he was charitable in his proposal, so he was just in the performance to a title. For he ordered the seamen that none should offer to touch anything I had. Then he took everything into his own possession, and gave me back an exact inventory of them, that I might have them, even so much as my 3 earthen jars. As to my boat, it was a very good one, and that he saw, and told me he would buy it of me for the ship's use, and asked me what I would have for it. I told him he had been so generous to me in everything that I could not offer to make any price for the boat, but left it entirely to him. Upon which he told me he would give me a note of his hand to pay me 80 pieces of 8 for it at Brazil. And when it came there, if anyone offered to give more, he would make it up. He offered me also 60 pieces of 8 more for my boy, Shuri, which I was loath to take. Not that I was not willing to let the captain have him, but I was very loath to sell the poor boy's liberty, who had assisted me so faithfully in procuring my own. However, when I let him know my reason, he owned it to be just, and offered me this medium, that he would give the boy an obligation to set him free in 10 years, if he turned Christian. Upon this, and Jury saying he was willing to go with him, I let the captain have him. We had a very good voyage to the Brazils and arrived in the bay de Todos los Santos, or All Saints Bay, in about 22 days after. And now I was once more delivered from the most miserable of all conditions of life. And what to do next with myself, I was now to consider. The generous treatment the captain gave me I can never enough remember. He would take nothing of me for my passage, gave me 20 ducats for the leopard skin, and 40 for the lion skin, which I had in my boat, and caused everything I had in the ship to be punctually delivered to me. And what I was willing to sell he bought, such as the cases of bottles, 2 of my guns, and a piece of lump of beeswax, for I had made candles of the rest. In a word, I made about 220 pieces of 8 of all my cargo, and with this stock I went on shore in the Brazils. I had not been long here, but being recommended to the house of a good honest man like himself, who had an engino, as they called it, that is, a plantation and sugar house, I lived with him some time, and acquainted myself by that means with the manner of their planting and making of sugar. And seeing how well the planters lived, and how they grew rich suddenly, I resolved if I could get a license to settle there, I would turn planter among them, resolving in the meantime to find out some way to get my money which I left in London remitted to me. To this purpose, getting a kind of letter of naturalization, I purchased as much land that was uncured as my money would reach, and formed a plan for my plantation and settlement, and such a one as might be suitable to the stock which I proposed to myself to receive from England. I had a neighbor, a Portuguese of Lisbon, but born of English parents, whose name was Wells, and in much such circumstances as I was. I call him my neighbor because his plantation lay next to mine, and we went on very sociably together. My stock was but low as well as his, and we rather planted for food than anything else, for about 2 years. However, we began to increase and our land began to come into order, so that the 3rd year we planted some tobacco and made each of us a large piece of ground ready for planting canes in the year to come. But we both wanted help, and now I find more than before I had done wrong in parting with my boy Jury. But alas, for me to do wrong that never did right was no great wonder. I had no remedy but to go on. I was gotten into an employment quite remote to my genius and directly contrary to the life I delighted in, and for which I forsook my father's house and broke through all his good advice. Nay, I was coming into the very middle station, or upper degree of low life, which my father advised me to before, and which, if I resolved to go on with, I might as well have stayed at home and never have fatigued myself in the world as I had done. And I used often to say to myself, I could have done this as well in England among my friends, as have gone 5,000 miles off to do it among strangers and savages in a wilderness, and at such a distance as never to hear from any part of the world that had the least knowledge of me. In this manner, I used to look upon my condition with the utmost regret. I had nobody to converse with, but now and then this neighbor. No work to be done but by the labor of my hands. And I used to say I lived just like a man cast away upon some desolate island that had nobody there but himself. But how just has it been? And how should all men reflect that when they compare their present conditions with others that are worse, heaven may oblige them to make the exchange and be convinced of their former felicity by their experience? I say, how just has it been that the truly solitary life I reflected on in an island of mere desolation should be my lot, who had so often unjustly compared it with the life which I then led, in which, had I continued, I had in all probability been exceedingly prosperous and rich. I was in some degree settled in my measures for carrying on the plantation before my kind friend, the captain of the ship that took me up to sea, went back. For the ship remained there in providing his loading and preparing for his voyage near 3 months, when telling him what little stock I had left behind me in London, he gave me this friendly and sincere advice. Signor Inglis, says he, for so he always called me, if you will give me letters and a procuration here informed to me, with orders to the person who has your money in London to send your effects to Lisbon, to such persons as I shall direct, and in such goods as are proper for this country, I will bring you the produce of them, God willing, at my return. But since human affairs are all subject to changes and disaster, I would have you give orders but for 100 pounds sterling, which you say is half your stock, and let the hazard be run for the first, so that if it come safe, you may order the rest the same way, and that if it miscarry, you may have the other half to have recourse to for your supply. This was so wholesome advice and looked so friendly that I could not be convinced it was the best course I could take. So I accordingly prepared papers to the gentlewoman with whom I had left my money, and a procuration to the Portuguese captain as he desired. I wrote the English captain's widow a full account of all my adventures, my slavery, escape, and how I had met with the Portuguese captain at sea, the humanity of his behavior, and in what condition I was in, with all other necessary directions for my supply. And when this honest captain came to Lisbon, he found means, by some of the English merchants there, to send over not the order only, but a full account of my story to a merchant in London, who represented it effectually to her, whereupon she not only delivered the money, but out of her own pocket sent the Portuguese captain a very handsome present for his humanity and charity to me. The merchant in London, vesting this 100 pounds in English goods, such as the captain had written for, sent them directly to him at Lisbon, and he brought them all safe to me to the Brazils, among which, without my direction, for I was too young in business to think of them, he had taken care to have all sorts of tools, ironwork, and utensils necessary for my plantation, and which were of great use to me. When this cargo arrived, I thought my fortune made, for I was surprised with joy of it, and my good steward, the captain, had laid out the 5 pounds which my friend had sent him for a present for himself, to purchase and bring me over a servant under bond for 6 years' service, and would not accept of any consideration except a little tobacco, which I would have him accept, being of my own produce. Neither was this all, but my goods being all English manufactures, such as cloth, stuffs, baize, and things particularly valuable and desirable in the country, I found means to sell them to a very great advantage, so that I may say I had more than 4 times the value of my first cargo, and was now infinitely beyond my poor neighbor. I mean, in the advancement of my plantation. For the first thing I did, I bought me a Negro slave and a European servant also. I mean another besides that which the captain brought me from Lisbon. But as abused prosperity is oftentimes made the very means of our greatest adversity, so was it with me. I went on the next year with great success in my plantation. I raised 50 great rolls of tobacco on my own ground, more than I had disposed of for necessities among my neighbors, and these 50 rolls, being each of above 100 weight, were well cured and laid by against the return of the fleet from Lisbon. And now, increasing in business and in wealth, my head began to be full of projects and undertakings beyond my reach, such as are indeed often the ruin of the best heads in business. Had I continued in the station I was now in, I had room for all the happy things to have yet befallen me for which my father so earnestly recommended a quiet, retired life, and of which he had so sensibly described the middle station of life to be full of. But other things attended me, and I was still to be the wilful agent of all my own miseries, and particularly to increase my fault and double the reflections upon myself, which, in my full sorrows, I should have leisure to make. All these miscarriages were procured by my apparent obstinate adhering to the foolish inclination of wandering abroad, and pursuing that inclination in contradiction to the clearest views of doing myself good in a fair and plain pursuit of these prospects and those measures of life, which nature and providence concurred to present me with, and to make my duty. And we'll pause here and we'll continue with this chapter in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I love you. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.